Welcome to Finscale, a podcast created by Solène Niederkorn, shedding light on innovation in finance, banking, and insurance.
World Bank Mysteries Unveiled. Andrea Monteleone, Senior Payments Expert at the World Bank.
The Western Balkans economies, both the authorities and the market participants with best practices from around the world. We have involved payment systems operators, regulators, major banking groups from the European Union to come to our events and share their strategies, the challenges they faced, and how they developed digital payment solutions to serve their customer bases.
In the same way that I greatly enjoyed hosting the EIF, a deputy and a finance minister, I'm delighted this week to understand the role played by the World Bank in the digitalisation and modernization of financial systems in emerging countries. Together with Andrea, we explore the example of instant payments and examine the role played by the World Bank in this implementation, particularly through the practical case of their deployment in the Western Balkans. This sheds light on the historic institution based in Washington, D.C., and it's a great way to understand the nature of their collaborations with both public and private sectors. You will understand concretely how the World Bank assists developing economies worldwide in modernizing payment systems and the financial sector in general. By partnering with policymakers and the private sectors, it develops a new playbook to drive impactful and resilient development. Modernizing the financial sector is just one aspect of it, as the World Bank has already been supporting more than 12,000 development projects, including infrastructures, schools, and roads. Enjoy the show! Hello, everyone. Hi, Andrea.
Hi, Solène. Thank you for having me.
I'm really happy to have you on the podcast because I already received great guests from European institutions like the European Investment Fund or the European Investment Bank, qualitative content from those actors and players. But I think that the World Bank is an institution that people don't really know. And in the domain of digitalization of the financial sector across the world is also a big question mark for many of my listeners. So could you please start by quickly introduce yourself and tell a bit about your background and what you're doing at the World Bank, and then we'll dig into it.
Sure. So first of all, let me say that since I discovered your podcast, I became a fan, at least of the episodes in English. So it's a pleasure to be part of one of your episodes. And what about me? I'm Andrea Monteleone. I'm an expert in payments. I'm an Italian based in Washington, D.C. I moved here a couple of years ago to join the Payment System Development Group of the World Bank. My job, the job of our team, is to assist developing economies around the world to modernize their national payment system, leveraging the innovation that is reshaping at a pretty high pace the financial sector. Prior to that, I was with MasterCard in Europe, where I held different roles. I have been both a management consultant for both internal consultancy to MasterCard against or towards major forces that were reshaping payments in Europe, like PSD2 or the advent of instant payments in Europe, and for major banking groups. And at MasterCard, I also held roles in product management. I was in charge of the digital consumer solutions of MasterCard in Europe. So I would define myself as a payment expert at this stage. Other than that, I know we share the passion for running. This is good because the development of modern payment systems, of digital payments, often is a marathon, a beautiful race, but it's good to know how to run it. So glad to be here with you to speak about it.
Great. Yes, and the listeners don't realize, but we've been already spending minutes talking about trail running before recording the episode. Okay, so Andrea, I guess the first question I would like to ask you is about the World Bank. Can you please give us a brief overview and maybe explain to us what's the primary mission of the World Bank?
Sure. So the World Bank is an international development organization with 189 members from countries all around the world. Our mission is to end extreme poverty and boost shared prosperity on a livable planet. And how we aim to achieve this mission is by partnering with all stakeholders, starting from policymakers, authorities around the world, but also engaging with the private sector to write what we define a new playbook to drive impactful development. How we at the World Bank define impactful development as a development that is inclusive, meaning that we do not leave anybody behind. We focus especially on the weakest segments of the population, on addressing those gaps like the rural gap or the gender gap that affect many countries around the world. We want development to be resilient, meaning that it can resist and navigate shocks, natural disasters, pandemics, crises of any sort. Lastly, we want development to be sustainable, meaning that it triggers and fosters a truly 360 growth of the countries we support. So it generates an increase in human capital, for example, the creation of markets, the increase of jobs, of new jobs in these markets. And we work with this approach across all major areas of development. For example, the team I'm part of focuses on modernizing the financial sector, but the World Bank is also active on, for example, building new schools or roads where they're needed, or bringing clean water where a population does not have access to it, or providing support to displaced population when a tsunami comes, for example. So we truly believe we make an impact across all areas of development. To give you a number, if I'm not mistaken, we delivered 12,000 development projects around the world since the constitution of the World Bank. And we believe that our role is important and our mission is important because our primary clients are the developing countries of the world. And these countries, if there was no player like the World Bank, would struggle to find the assistance, both in terms of technical advisory and in terms of financial support that they need to undertake these development projects.
Okay, interesting. And in what sense do you collaborate with, on one side, public sectors with other supranational organizations such as European Investment Bank, central banks, government agencies, and on the other side, the private sectors? So those are completely different stakeholders. So what is the nature of those collaborations, public versus private?
With the public sector, our clients, policymakers, authorities, we do provide technical advisory and financial support to design, develop, and implement development projects. We also involve the private sector in these initiatives because often the authorities are our entry point in a way in any jurisdiction, but then our initiatives in most cases are large scope initiatives that involve an entire ecosystem. So we, through the authorities, connect with the private sector, and it is a priority for us to crowd in the investment of the private sector to foster the development of the private sector because it aligns to our mission. Then I believe that we, in general, operate as a bridge because we bring together, on the one side, the policymakers and the authorities, the international standard setting bodies, and on the other side, the private sector. In the case of my team, commercial banks, but also fintech or telcos, through a variety of how can I call it, channels, global convenings, communities of practices, event. And we do so with the objective of fostering collaboration, of creating that much needed platform where a fair, open, and inclusive dialogue can take place to discuss together joint agendas for development on a variety of topics and to align the interest of the private sector and the priorities of public policy.
Mm-hmm. So you're from Europe, you're Italian, so you know instant payments. Why are they so important for modern financial systems?
How fast payments can benefit modern financial systems, I would say they can do on a variety of levels. The first one is that fast payments can support a variety of payment instruments. being them credit transfers or direct debits, for example. They can support a variety of payment use cases and types. For example, the so-called person-to-person flow of money, but also the B2B flow of money, but also the person to government or vice versa, government to person or businesses. This means that fast payments can bring that integration, that interoperability that oftentimes is lacking in financial systems. Another benefit of fast payments is that they can be offered not only by traditional players like commercial banks, but also by new players, fintech, mobile money providers, challenger banks, neobanks. And this means that they can potentially open up a market and increase competition. And this comes at an obvious benefit for the end users in terms of innovation and reduced costs. So better services at lower cost. This is an important aspect, especially in developing economies, where oftentimes financial services are very expensive to access for the population. And this brings me to another benefit. Fast payments, being digital by nature, can smoothly incorporate what we call overlay services, which are services that could be financial or non-financial in their content, that are built, I would say, on top of and around the core payment service. Here I'm referring, for example, to the use of QR codes to simplify the user experience of initiating a transaction, but I'm also referring to what is called request to pay. So, for example, the service through which a business can incorporate an invoice, adding transparency to a transaction. Obviously, this benefits the use of overlay services, facilitate the adoption of digital payments, which mean digitalization of the economy, less reliance on cash, formalization. So broader, the adoption of fast payments truly can spark broader benefits for an economy, for a financial system. And if we are talking now about theory, let me give you two practical examples, Brazil and Thailand. In the case of Brazil, the central bank, Banco Central do Brasil, launched the PIX, a fast payment system that in 1 year of operations outpaced all other payment solutions available in the market. And today, 9 businesses out of 10 in Brazil rely on PIX to accept payments. And if you know the context of Brazil, you can imagine that out of these now 9 out of 10 businesses, sorry for the game of words, some are micro merchants, individual entrepreneurs that literally sell their goods on the streets, for example. For them, fast payments meant starting to accept electronic payments while simply they could not before. So it was transformative. It was a paradigm change for the economy of Brazil. I mentioned also Thailand. Thailand is the first country in the world in terms of instant payment transactions per capita. In Thailand, the fast payment system is called Prompt Pay. ACI Worldwide estimates that Prompt Pay and in general instant payments in Thailand will generate an additional economic output equal to 2% of the GDP of the country, of the estimated GDP of Thailand in 2026. And this additional value is driven by the cost savings that merchants can access, by the share of the economy that is formalized by the adoption by payers and payees of digital payments. So these are material examples of the impact that fast payments can produce on an economy, on a financial system.
And the different stakeholders you're in contact with in each country differs, or is it the same entry point?
So typically, our client is represented by the authority. So in the context of payments, this would be the central bank. Then, depending on what the very content of the project in a country, we can engage with different stakeholders. So, for example, in some markets, we work also with the entire ecosystem of what are defined payment service providers. So basically, the providers of payment services, banks and fintech, where these are are allowed to offer payment services. In other countries, we can also work, for example, with other government agencies because we want to deploy financial education initiatives to help the population, both of consumers and merchants, to increase the adoption of digital payments. And what I can say in this context is that even if fast payments could either be publicly owned or privately owned, meaning that we have observed both models in the world, we believe that it is right for the central bank, which is our direct client, typically to take a steering role, because the central bank is in the position, for example, to partner with an organization with the World Bank to facilitate the knowledge sharing with best practices from different jurisdictions, is in a position to promote and, let me say, push the participation and commitment of the private sector. And it can also align the priorities of financial policy with the objectives that could differ to some extent. And this is natural of the private sector.
So I had in mind a use case that is available on your website about the Western Balkans modernization and the integration of payment systems in this region. I don't know if you've been working on this interesting use case, but I would be interested to know the different challenges that developing countries usually face when adopting fast payment among central banks, commercial banks, and fintech companies. What are the different complexities of these implementation projects?
So I would say that the Western Balkans modernization project is a good example in this regard. The development of domestic fast payment infrastructure is just one leg of that project, because that is a truly comprehensive initiative, I would say. It involves the Western Balkans 6, so Albania, Bosnia, Kosovo, North Macedonia, Montenegro, and Serbia, because they represent a region which is integrated. And this is indeed one of the important characteristics of this project. The challenges that they face is that these economies are still not fully digitalized at a domestic level. And even if the ties between these countries are strong, the economies are not integrated as they could be. And since payments do represent the backbone of any economy, we believe that payments could be the tool to pursue a greater level of integration between these economies. In terms of challenges that these countries are facing, the first one I would say is these countries are facing high costs of payments because of the lack, again, of interoperability, of integration between the economies. Consider that for micro, small, and medium businesses in the Western Balkans, for intra-region trade, it could be 6 times as expensive as it is for their peers in the European Union to trade with each other. These countries also face huge challenges in terms of, for example, the cost of remittances. Remittances are basically the funds transferred home by diaspora, by people who leave their countries to find a job and send money home. The Western Balkans are a region where there were in 2022 12 billion of inflow of US dollars of inflow of remittances. These remittances are expensive in the Western Balkans, well above the target set by the United Nations, and we want these countries to reduce these costs. The Western Balkans also face a gap in terms of financial inclusion compared to the European Union, which is I would say, the benchmark that we want to bring the region towards. And we are working with the project to address these challenges. It's obvious, as you were mentioning, that there are challenges faced by the market players and by the policymakers in how to tackle the project. Because on the one side, we work with the authorities, for example, to update the regulation under the project in the Western Balkans. We are helping authorities adopting the national payment laws and regulations, the articles of the PSD2 and the requirements for joining SEPA, the Single European Payment Area. And we are also working with the authorities to develop fast payment infrastructures. On the other side, the big challenge is that a market needs to adopt this. So banks and fintech need to comply with updated regulations, and this comes with complexities for them. But countries also need to efficiently and smoothly and at value for them to connect to a fast payment infrastructure in order to develop and offer fast payment services. How do we help both sides of the market, the public and the private, to address these challenges? Through the project, we created a platform which in practice takes the form of events, of workshops, of panels where we involve all payment service providers in the market, because this is very important to have everybody sitting at the same table and being given an opportunity to present the challenges they face, the needs that they have, the constraints that they have. And through this platform, central banks typically share the plan, the progress, for example, in adopting SEPA requirements. But on the other side, the private sector can raise challenges. Can raise questions. I give you a practical example. I mentioned QR codes. For QR codes to succeed, it's important to have a national standard. It's important that all different players use the same standards so that I can pay with my mobile banking app at merchants relying on different banks. This is something that can only be solved through the collaboration, through the partnership that we try to facilitate and foster through the project. And another way that we are using to tackle these challenges is that we are connecting the Western Balkans economies, both the authorities and the market participants, with best practices from around the world. We have involved payment systems operators, regulators, major banking groups from the European Union to come to our events and share their strategies, the challenges they faced, and how they developed digital payment solutions to serve their customer bases.
Okay, Andrea, one last question about, when we look into the future, in my crystal ball, I see many, many new initiatives like CBDCs and things like that. So can you say a few words about this and tell us if you work in that direction?
Sure. So we see the same future where innovation in the financial sector will bring significant evolution. I would say that we at the World Bank also consider ourselves a knowledge bank, meaning that it is a core component of our business to advance and bring one step further every day the frontier of knowledge on payments, in my case, on the financial sector in general, for the global practice I'm part of. And in this perspective, for example, we are exploring a variety of topics that are indeed reshaping the financial industry. I can mention innovation in the context of retail payments, for example, the advent of buy now, pay later solutions that are surging around the world. But I can also mention the increasing number of open banking and open finance frameworks that countries around the world are developing and adopting, and their interplay with digital payments is a key area of focus for us. But I can also mention, for example, CBDC, central bank digital currencies. This is something that the vast majority of central banks around the world are exploring today for different reasons. We have produced, for example, a white paper on this, where we worked also with the BIS, the Bank for International Settlements, and we have interviewed a variety of policymakers at advanced stages of exploration of CBDC to understand what the opportunities are, what the models to deploy these solutions could be, and what also the implications, for example, from a legal regulatory risk standpoint could be for the economy where these are introduced. This for payments, so for what they focus on, is an important topic, and specifically for fast payments, because the interplay between fast payments and CBDC and crypto is an important focus of the conversation today. Some perspectives are that they are alternative to each other. Our perspective is that there are synergies to pursue. And therefore, we plan on expanding further the research on this on our end.
Thank you, Andrea, for these clarifications. what book would you recommend to me and to the listeners to conclude?
Look, I have this on my desk right now. I don't know if I have.
Show me.
If it's by chance. But this is Atomic Habits.
Okay. A classic one.
It's not an industry book, though. It tells more about me, I guess.
Yeah, but did you finish the book?
I did finish the book, and I see many applications. I would say now maybe I'm stretching it too much, but I see that our lesson, the lesson at least for me, is that the development of financial sectors take time, but you build it one step at a time in an atomic perspective, if you want, and this could. And this is the key: long-term commitment, partnerships across all stakeholders. This is what is required. Big things take time to achieve, but commitment is the key. So that I would say.
Thank you very much.
I don't know if it makes any sense.
It's perfect. I love that book. Thank you very much, Andrea, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you for having me.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you all for listening and sharing this moment with us. Don't hesitate to contact me on Twitter or LinkedIn to share your comments and reactions. You can also rate this episode on your favorite podcast platform. See you soon.